The captain laughed inside his own precinct, uniform crisp, voice loud enough for the room. Bumpy Johnson didn't answer. He just looked at him, like time had already decided what came next. The precinct smelled like old paper, wet wool, and authority that had been handled too many times. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and uncaring. Desks sat in rows like they always had, wood scarred by elbows, ink stains, and small lies told daily. Bumpy Johnson stood where he was told to stand. No cuffs, no push, just placement. That alone made the room uneasy. The captain didn't bother lowering his voice. He wanted witnesses. Uniform pressed sharp, hat set just right, confidence polished by decades of being obeyed. He leaned back against a desk, like the building itself belonged to him. "Well," the captain said, smiling, "Harlem's king decided to visit us. Lauder came fast, too fast, the kind that jumps before thinking." Bumpy didn't blink. He took in the room slowly, faces, posture, the way some men laughed while others kept their mouths shut. He noticed which officers leaned forward, eager, and which stayed back, careful. He noticed who avoided his eyes. The captain mistook that silence. He stepped closer, boots echoing on the floor, enjoying the sound. "You know," he continued, "I expected more. Bigger, louder. All that reputation, and this is it." Another laugh. Louder this time. Bumpy's hand stayed still at his sides. His face didn't harden, didn't soften either. It stayed calm, unreadable, like water that hides its depth. That calm bothered people. The captain tilted his head, trying to find something: anger, fear, pride. Anything he could grab and use. "You hear me, Johnson? This badge outranks whatever you think you are out there." Bumpy finally looked at him, not sharply, not threatening, just directly. The room shifted, not because of what Bumpy did, but because of what he didn't. He didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't defend his name. Men who rely on force expect resistance. Men who rely on respect don't offer it. Bumpy's eyes moved past the captain, past the desks, past the walls, as if Harlem itself were standing behind him, quiet and patient. Someone near the back stopped smiling. The captain felt it too, though he wouldn't admit it. He cleared his throat, straightened his jacket, raised his voice again, too loud now. "You're in my house," he said, "and in my house, I decide who gets laughed at." Bumpy nodded once, a small gesture, almost polite. That nod landed heavier than any threat, because it said, "I heard you." And worse, it said, "I don't need to answer you here." The captain waved him off, satisfied with his performance. "Get him out of my sight." As Bumpy turned to leave, the laughter didn't follow. It stayed behind, trapped in the room with the men who needed it. The door closed softly. No slam, no words, but something had been set in motion. Outside, Harlem didn't rush him. The street held its breath the way it always did when Bumpy Johnson stepped back into it. Not from fear, from recognition. People looked without staring. Nods replaced words. A man sweeping the sidewalk slowed his strokes. A woman at the corner fruit stand pretended not to notice, then slipped an extra apple into a bag for someone else. Respect doesn't announce itself. It settles. Bumpy walked steady, unbothered. The precinct was already behind him, shrinking with every step. Buildings leaned closer now. Brownstones, barbershops, churches that knew his name without ever saying it aloud. This was where authority lived without uniforms. Word traveled fast, but not loudly. No one said insult. No one said mocked. They just said, "It happened." Men on stoops exchanged looks. Card games paused mid-hand. A bookmaker closed early without explanation. Harlem understood tone better than language, and the tone had changed. Bumpy stopped at a corner and leaned against a lamppost. He didn't summon anyone, didn't make a call. He didn't need to. Power that has to be chased isn't power, it's desperation. A young runner appeared anyway, breathless, eyes wide. "You all right, Bumpy?" Bumpy glanced at him, calm, almost amused. "Why wouldn't I be?" That answer spread faster than anger ever could. Inside back rooms, conversations shifted direction. Men who usually spoke big chose smaller words. A few favors were quietly delayed. A few doors that had always been open suddenly required knocking. No commands came from Bumpy. That was the point. Harlem wasn't reacting because Bumpy was offended. Harlem reacted because someone had crossed a line they all depended on staying intact. If respect could be mocked publicly, it could be taken from anyone, and that threatened everybody. By nightfall, the captain's name moved through the neighborhood, not as gossip, not as warning, but as weight, heavy, uncomfortable. The kind you feel before something irreversible happens. Bumpy sat later in a quiet room, lights low, listening more than speaking. Someone asked if he wanted it handled. Bumpy shook his head. "Let the city answer," he said. Outside, Harlem already was. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in. A phone rang in an office downtown and went unanswered. A meeting scheduled weeks ago was suddenly postponed, no reason given. A favor that was always automatic now came with hesitation, then silence. The captain felt it before he understood it. He woke up restless, the echo of yesterday's laughter still stuck in his throat. At headquarters, his name didn't open doors the way it used to. A clerk avoided his eyes. A lieutenant answered him carefully, like each word needed approval first. Nothing was said out loud. That was the cruelty of it. Bumpy Johnson never had to touch the man, never had to threaten him. Power, when used right, lets other people do the remembering for you. Across Harlem, Bumpy's circle stayed quiet. No celebrations, no chest thumping, just patience. They knew this kind of pressure couldn't be rushed. You rush it, and it breaks wrong. Someone suggested a show of force. Bumpy's response was calm. "Force makes noise," he said. "Noise gives excuses." So the noise stayed low. A precinct car passed through Harlem slower than usual that night. Officers inside kept their windows up. They weren't afraid of violence. They were afraid of attention, of being seen on the wrong side of something they couldn't name. The captain tried calling favors of his own, old ones, solid ones, the kind he'd earned over years of shared drinks and shared cover-ups. The line rang. Someone picked up. Then excuses came, tight schedules, family issues, promises to call back. No one called back. The city wasn't turning against him violently. It was turning away. That's the part they never teach you. How power dies quietly, how it evaporates without leaving fingerprints. By evening, the captain stood alone in his office, jacket still on, staring at a phone that refused to help him anymore. He replayed the moment in his head, the laugh, the room, the look Bumpy gave him. Not anger, not fear, certainty. That look said, "You've already stepped past the point where I need to do anything." Somewhere across Harlem, Bumpy sat with men who trusted him, because he never confused dominance with cruelty. He reminded them again, softly, this isn't about revenge, it's about balance. Balance was being restored, slowly, relentlessly. Respect is a strange thing. You can't demand it, you can't steal it, and once it's gone, no amount of noise can buy it back. Bumpy Johnson understood that better than most men understood violence. He sat at the table with his people, not at the head. The room was quiet except for ice shifting in glasses. No one interrupted him. No one needed to. His presence set the rhythm. "This isn't personal," he said finally. His voice was low, steady. "Personal makes men sloppy." Someone asked what the lesson was supposed to be. Bumpy looked at him, not sharply, not gently. "The lesson already happened," he said. "In that precinct." They waited. Silence stretched. Bumpy let it. Silence always tells the truth if you give it enough time. That man laughed because he thought the room belonged to him. Bumpy continued. "And rooms like that only work if everyone agrees who they belong to." He stood, slow, deliberate. "We don't embarrass him back. We don't touch him. We let him feel what happens when respect stops circulating." Outside, the city complied. A supplier hesitated before signing off on paperwork. A judge rescheduled a friendly hearing. A reporter lost interest in a story that might have helped the captain's image. Small things, innocent things, but they stacked. Violence would have been quicker, cleaner. But quicker isn't always stronger. Bumpy knew violence creates martyrs. Respect creates ghosts. The captain started noticing how alone he'd become. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Invitations dried up. Even his own officers watched him differently now, not with defiance, but with calculation. They were measuring distance. Back in Harlem, Bumpy reminded his people why this mattered beyond pride. If they can mock one of us publicly, he said, they can mock all of us privately. That wasn't a threat, that was policy. The neighborhood remembered who had protected them when protection wasn't profitable, who kept order without turning streets into war zones. Loyalty isn't built on fear, it's built on consistency. And consistency was Bumpy's quiet weapon. By night, the captain felt smaller inside his own skin, not attacked, not accused, just diminished. That was the currency being spent. Night didn't bring relief, it brought awareness. The captain sat in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The city outside his window kept moving, indifferent to his rank, his years, his framed commendations. For the first time in a long while, the badge on his chest felt decorative. Phones stayed silent. That silence pressed in, heavy, unforgiving. He replayed the precinct scene again, slower this time. Not the laughter, not the men, just Bumpy Johnson's face, the calm, the patience, the certainty that didn't need approval. Men like the captain were trained to read fear, anger, defiance. They were never trained to read restraint. Somewhere across Harlem, Bumpy walked the streets late, alone. He liked the city at night. Less performance, more truth. He passed storefronts that stayed open because he'd kept them that way. Streets that slept because he made sure they could. A man nodded from a doorway. Another tipped his hat. No words, no questions. The night understood him. Back at the precinct, the captain finally stood, straightened his jacket, and looked at himself in the mirror. The face looking back didn't look defeated. It looked exposed. He realized something then. This wasn't about what Bumpy might do. This was about what Bumpy no longer had to prevent. Without him, the balance shifted. Without him, consequences got louder. Without him, things escalated. The city preferred Bumpy's order to chaos dressed as enforcement. That thought scared him more than any threat ever could. He picked up a pen, set it down, picked it up again. Outside, the sky began to lighten at the edges. Morning creeping in, indifferent. The captain knew how this ended, not with handcuffs, not with headlines, but with disappearance. A quiet exit before the city decided for him. He started writing. The paper sat on the desk like it had always been there. Typed, clean, no smudges, no emotion, just a resignation effective immediately. No reasons offered, no accusations made. A signature at the bottom that felt heavier than it looked. The captain folded his jacket carefully, straightened the chair, turned off the lamp. By the time the sun cleared the rooftops, his office already felt like it belonged to someone else. There was no escort out, no final conversation. The building didn't care enough to witness the ending. Men like him are remembered by presence, not absence, and absence arrives fast. Across Harlem, morning arrived normally. Shops opened, coffee steamed from cups. Kids ran to school. Nobody celebrated. Nobody explained. They didn't need to. Bumpy Johnson stood near a window, watching the day begin. Someone told him the news. He listened. He nodded once. That's how it should be, he said. No pride in it. No satisfaction. Just acceptance. Because the point was never humiliation. The point was correction. Harlem remembered that lesson long after the paper yellowed and the name faded from office doors. They remembered that power doesn't shout, that real authority doesn't need witness, that respect, once broken publicly, has consequences that arrive quietly. Bumpy didn't give speeches about legacy. He lived it. Years later, men would still talk about that morning, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No blood, no arrests, no chaos, just a city choosing order over ego, and a man who never raised his voice, yet decided the ending anyway.